It starts in silence. You're sitting in your room, small legs tucked under the blanket, listening not to cartoons, not to laughter, but to the sound of voices cracking through walls. You don't speak. You've learned not to, because every word feels like it could shatter something fragile. So you hold it all in your fears, your questions, your truth. And somewhere between trying to stay invisible and trying to stay safe, you became the unspoken child. The one who learned that silence was safer than honesty, and that love often meant disappearing. The unspoken child isn't always quiet because they want to be. They're quiet because they had to be. It's not shyness, it's survival. It's the psychology of a child who learned early that their emotions were too loud for the world around them. When parents fight, when chaos fills the room, when love comes with conditions, children adapt. Some rebel, some cry louder, but some like you turn inward. You start watching instead of speaking. You start analyzing instead of asking. You become fluent in unspoken language, tone, tension, the look in someone's eyes before everything breaks. This isn't a disorder, it's a defense. Your silence becomes your armor. Your stillness becomes your strategy. Psychologists call this emotional suppression, fawning, or hypervigilance. But let's call it what it feels like, a quiet war. A war fought with smiles that hide the storm, nods that replace no, and silence that screams, please don't leave. You learned that speaking your truth might cost you love, so you built a life around being safe instead of seen. But safety eventually becomes a cage. It doesn't start in adulthood. It starts in the small, fragile moments of childhood. Maybe you grew up in a home where emotions were too big, too loud, too unsafe, where anger was explosive, or love was conditional, where mistakes earned silence instead of understanding. You remember it vividly, the day you realized no one was coming to rescue you. You watched your parents argue, voices sharp as broken glass. You wanted to ask them to stop. You wanted to cry, but your tears made them angrier. So you learned to disappear. Or maybe your parents weren't cruel, they were just absent, always busy, always tired. And you thought, if I stay quiet, they'll love me more. If I don't cause trouble, they'll finally notice. You became the good child, the helper, the peacekeeper, the invisible glue holding everyone together. You sensed moods before they were spoken. You cleaned up emotional messes that weren't yours to clean. And every time you swallowed your truth, the silence inside you grew heavier. You learned to read people instead of trusting them. You learned that your needs were dangerous. You learned that love required performance. That's how the unspoken child is born, not from lack of voice, but from fear of what the voice could cause. And the saddest part, he carried that silence into adulthood. You became the person who says, it's fine, when it's not. The one who comforts others while quietly falling apart. Because long ago, silence became your language of survival. You might not even realize it, but the echoes of that childhood silence still shape how you live today. Let's look at how. You apologize for existing. Even when you've done nothing wrong, I'm sorry slips out of your mouth before your mind can stop it. You've learned that peace is more important than truth. You read people like weather patterns. You can sense tension in a room before anyone speaks. Your body tightens, your heart races, because somewhere deep inside, you're still that child scanning for danger. You struggle to express needs. You say you're low maintenance, but truthfully, you've just trained yourself not to need. You've mistaken silence for strength. You fawn, constantly adjusting, pleasing, smoothing over, just to keep the peace. You say yes when every part of you screams no. You laugh to fill the silence. You care so others won't leave, because rejection feels like death. You have an internal critic louder than anyone else's voice. It tells you you're too much, or not enough. It tells you your emotions are burdens. Your pain is inconvenient. You might even overachieve, because if you can't be loved for who you are, maybe you'll be loved for what you do. But that praise feels hollow, doesn't it? Because no achievement can fill the space where your voice should have been. And at night, when the world quiets down, that's when you feel it most. The silence you once used to protect yourself now feels like a prison. The mask you wear feels heavy, and you whisper into the dark words you've never said out loud. I just wish someone had asked how I felt. Psychologists have long studied what happens when children are forced into emotional silence. When you grow up having to regulate others' emotions, your brain becomes wired for hypervigilance, a constant state of alertness, scanning for cues of danger or disapproval. Neuroscience shows that this activates the amygdala, the brain's fear center. You become sensitive to tone, volume, even body language, mirror neurons firing constantly, trying to predict and prevent conflict. This drains your nervous system, leading to chronic anxiety, exhaustion, and emotional burnout, what's known as compassion fatigue. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow self, the parts of us we hide to survive. For the unspoken child, that shadow is full of unshed tears, words never spoken, needs never met. Studies from the Journal of Personality suggest that suppression of emotion in childhood correlates with depression, low self-worth, and identity confusion in adulthood. This isn't because you're broken, it's because your brain and body did exactly what they needed to do to survive. But now, as an adult, the very mechanisms that once protected you are the same ones keeping you from being free. Here's what no one tells you about growing up silent. You forget how to be heard. You start doubting your own emotions. You gaslight yourself, telling yourself it wasn't that bad, that you're being dramatic. You minimize your pain because you were trained to believe it didn't matter. You struggle in relationships not because you don't care, but because you care too much. You anticipate needs before they're spoken. You carry unspoken responsibilities, and when someone finally asks what you want, you freeze. You don't know. Your boundaries blur, your sense of self fades, and every time you try to speak up, guilt follows, because silence became your safety, and now, truth feels dangerous. The dark truth is this: the unspoken child grows into an adult who feels invisible, even in love. They attract people who mirror the same emotional distance they grew up with. They keep recreating the silence they once hated because it feels familiar. You smile when you want to scream. You say I'm fine when your soul is aching. And the saddest part, most people believe you, because you've mastered the art of appearing okay. You've built a fortress out of composure, but inside, there's a small child still waiting for someone to finally listen. And here's the quiet tragedy. You've spent your whole life making sure others feel safe, while never once feeling safe yourself. But here's the truth you need to hear now. You don't have to stay silent anymore. Healing begins the moment you allow your voice to tremble. The moment you stop apologizing for feeling. The moment you realize your needs are not too much, they're human. Start small. Speak your truth in whispers if you must. Journal the words you couldn't say as a child. Write to the version of you who stayed quiet. Tell them they did nothing wrong. Therapy can help rewire the patterns of silence. Techniques like inner child work and shadow integration, inspired by Jung, allow you to meet that hidden part of yourself with compassion instead of shame. You'll learn to regulate your nervous system, to breathe before you please, to choose honesty over harmony. It won't be easy. At first your voice will shake. You'll feel guilt, fear, resistance. But remember, silence was learned, and what's learned can be unlearned. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to have needs. You are allowed to make noise in a world that once punished your sound. You were never born to be invisible. You learned to be. But now, you get to unlearn it. You get to reclaim your sound, your truth, yourself. You get to be loud in your softness, clear in your boundaries, unapologetic in your voice. The silent child inside you has waited long enough. It's time to let them speak. And when you do, you'll realize something powerful. Your voice was never the problem. The world just wasn't ready for its truth. But now it's your time. You don't owe the world your silence anymore. You owe yourself your freedom.